Some people don't just disrespect you. They study your reactions, test your patience, and wait for that moment you lose control. That's their playground. The chaos, the drama, the emotional explosion. But here's the twist. The real strength doesn't lie in yelling, snapping back, or stooping to their level. The real dominance, it's in remaining completely unfazed, cool, composed, and delivering a line so unexpected, so razor-sharp, that it shuts down their nonsense without you breaking a sweat. No raised voice, no tension, just cold precision. In this video, I'm going to give you 7 verbal responses that slice through disrespect like a blade. Calm, clean, and final. Say these, and you won't just stop disrespect. You'll make them think twice before ever stepping out of line again. Now, let's get into it. 1. You can talk, I just don't have to care. Some people confuse having a voice with having value. They speak not to contribute, but to dominate. They throw around criticism like confetti, hoping something sticks, hoping they can shake your confidence. But here's the move. Don't resist them. Disarm them. Not with fire, but with detachment. You can talk, I just don't have to care. That one line. It's not aggressive. It's not even defensive. It's surgical. It quietly destroys their illusion that their words matter to you. Let me tell you where I learned this. Years ago, I was working on a side hustle I truly believed in. I was pouring hours into it, late nights, skipped weekends, sacrificing sleep. I shared it with someone I once respected, expecting support, or maybe even some constructive feedback. But instead, they scoffed. That sounds dumb. Nobody's going to take that seriously. The old me would have taken the bait, explained my plan, defended my passion, maybe even questioned myself, but not this time. I looked them dead in the eye and said, "You can talk. I just don't have to care." Then I went back to work. And that was it. Silence. No comeback. Just awkward stillness. Because in that moment, they realized something painful. They had no power over me. Their words didn't land. Their voice didn't matter. Why does this line work so well? Because it flips the dynamic. It says, "You are free to speak, but I am free to be unmoved." It shows that you are not emotionally available for their negativity. And that's something rude people can't stand. They feed off engagement. They want you to react. But this line starves them of both attention and validation. It makes them feel exactly what they hate the most. Irrelevant. When to use it? When someone mocks your ambition, your goals, your lifestyle. When a toxic coworker throws jabs in a meeting to feel superior. When a judgmental relative tries to make your decisions sound foolish. This comeback doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It whispers with finality. And that's what makes it powerful. 2. If I relied on your wisdom, I'd be in trouble. Some people speak with the confidence of a scholar. But the insight of a brick wall, they act like their opinion is gospel. Like their sarcasm is clever. Like their critique is guidance. But when you actually zoom out and look at their life, their habits, their results, you realize something important. They're loud, not wise. And when someone like that tries to insult you, here's your move. If I relied on your wisdom, I'd be in trouble. This line doesn't shout. It doesn't insult. It reveals. It makes them confront a truth they've tried to hide behind noise. They don't actually know what they're talking about. Let me paint the picture. I once worked with a guy. We'll call him Kyle. Kyle had an opinion on everything. He never listened, never built anything meaningful. And yet he positioned himself like the office philosopher. One day, while I was explaining a new strategy to the team, Kyle interrupted with a smirk. "Oh, look who's trying to play expert now." Everyone laughed nervously. You could feel the tension shift. That's what guys like him thrive on, stealing the moment, making others feel small. But I didn't flinch. I turned to him and calmly said, "Kyle, if I relied on your wisdom, I'd be in trouble." And I went back to presenting. Silence. Kyle stared at me, trying to come up with a comeback. But nothing came out. Because everyone in that room knew the truth. The guy who never adds value just got exposed. Why this works so well? It doesn't attack their character. It highlights their lack of credibility. And there's nothing more painful for a know-it-all than being reminded they know very little. When they try to undermine your confidence, you flip the script and show them they were never qualified to judge you in the first place. When to use it? When someone constantly interrupts you with sarcasm but never offers solutions. When a family member criticizes your goals but has none of their own. When a fake friend mocks your progress but hasn't made any themselves. This isn't just a comeback, it's a mirror. And most rude people can't stand their own reflection. 3. I don't waste time on people who mistake disrespect for confidence. There's a certain type of person who believes being rude is a personality trait. They confuse arrogance with strength. They think that tearing others down makes them appear powerful. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. It just makes them look weak in disguise. And when someone like that tries to get under your skin, you don't argue. You don't engage. You just look at them with calm certainty and say, I don't waste time on people who mistake disrespect for confidence. It's not just a comeback, it's a diagnosis. You're calling out their entire persona for what it is, an insecure performance dressed up as power. Let me share when I used this. There was a guy I worked with, let's call him Adam. Adam had a habit of belittling people in meetings. If someone made a suggestion, he'd laugh. If someone shared a win, he'd find a way to minimize it. One day during a presentation, I shared a simple process improvement. Nothing dramatic, just a small idea to make things smoother. Adam leaned back in his chair, smirked, and said, "Oh great, another genius idea from the intern." The room got quiet. Everyone felt it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I looked him in the eye and said, I don't waste time on people who mistake disrespect for confidence. And then I turned back to my work. He didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. Because here's the truth. People like that don't expect you to stand firm. They expect you to crumble or fight back emotionally. But when you stay composed and hit them with calm clarity, it's like emotional judo. You flip their attack on them and walk away untouched. Why this line hits hard? It doesn't fight. It exposes. It tells the rude person, I see through your act. And it reminds everyone around that confidence isn't loud and respect isn't optional. This line doesn't just shut down disrespect. It disqualifies it. When to use it? When someone disguises rudeness as just being honest. When a coworker tries to assert dominance through condescension. When a friend or relative constantly tries to mock your progress. This line sends a message loud and clear. You don't confuse noise for wisdom, and you don't entertain clowns just because they want a stage. 4. Keep talking. Every word reveals more about you and less about me. Some people talk just to hear themselves speak. They throw insults, gossip, and sarcasm, convinced they're making you look bad. But in reality, all they're doing is broadcasting their own insecurity. And when someone like that comes for you, don't match their volume. Don't meet them in the gutter. Just calmly say, keep talking. Every word reveals more about you and less about me. It's not a defense. It's a reminder, a subtle one, that every jab, every dig, every snide comment, it doesn't expose your flaws. It puts theirs on full display. Let me give you the real-life version. There was a guy in my network. We'll call him Brandon. Brandon had a habit of speaking over people, especially when he felt threatened. I once brought up a project I'd completed that had great results, and right away he chimed in with, "Wow, must have been a slow month if they gave you credit for that." I could have fired back. I could have listed the numbers, the metrics, the proof. Instead, I looked at him and said, "Keep talking. Every word reveals more about you, and less about me." Then I sipped my coffee and waited. He stammered, laughed nervously, changed the subject. Why? Because I didn't give him what he wanted, a reaction. I gave him what he needed, a reflection. Why this line is so effective? Because it shifts the spotlight. It says, you're not insulting me, you're revealing yourself. And deep down, that stings more than any insult ever could. People who use disrespect as a weapon rarely realize they're just making themselves look small. But when you say this line, you hold up the mirror and make them see it without raising your voice once. When to use it: when someone makes a passive-aggressive comment in front of others, when a toxic friend tries to tear you down under the disguise of a joke, when a colleague tries to embarrass you during a discussion. This line takes away their ability to shift blame, because now every word they say is just more evidence of who they are, not who you are. 5. Your behavior says more than your words ever could. Disrespectful people often think they're clever. They'll throw subtle insults, act superior, or roll their eyes, then pretend like they didn't mean anything by it. They're innocent. You're just too sensitive. But you know better. And when they try that nonsense, here's what you say: your behavior says more than your words ever could. That line, it's surgical. It doesn't accuse, it reveals. It tells them, you've already exposed yourself, and I don't even have to respond. Because here's the truth: people can say anything. They can pretend to be polite. They can sugarcoat their tone. But their actions, their body language, the smirk, the sarcasm, the tone behind the tone, that's where the truth leaks out. Let me give you the real-world version. I once had a mentor I admired, or at least thought I did. We'll call him Darren. At first he seemed supportive, but the more I grew, the more his tone shifted. He started slipping in comments like, "Don't get too ahead of yourself," or "You're still a long way off from being ready." It sounded casual, but the message underneath? Clear as day. One day he said, "I'm just trying to keep you grounded." I looked him in the eye and said, "Your behavior says more than your words ever could." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just left it there and watched him process it. He knew exactly what I meant, and he didn't say another word. Why this line works? Because it cuts through manipulation. You're not chasing clarity. You're not asking them to explain themselves. You're simply holding up the mirror and letting their actions speak for themselves. This line keeps you in control, calm, clear, unshaken, and it sends a message they can't dodge. I see you, and I'm not fooled. When to use it: when someone tries to mask jealousy with backhanded compliments, when a coworker undermines you in front of others, then acts like it's a joke, when a family member or partner says one thing but behaves completely differently. This comeback gives you the upper hand without raising your voice. Because in the end, truth always lives in behavior, and you just called it out. 6. I hope being loud makes up for being wrong. Some people think volume equals value. They raise their voice, cut people off, and talk over everyone like it's a competition. They assume that if they say something forcefully enough, it'll suddenly become truth. But here's the quiet killer move. I hope being loud makes up for being wrong. This comeback is like a tranquilizer dart to the ego. You're not fighting, you're not flustered. You're simply pointing out that their whole performance is compensating for a lack of actual substance. Let me tell you when I used this one. There was a meeting once. 10 people around the table trying to solve a logistics issue. A guy named Marcus dominated every second of it. He talked over everyone, dismissed every idea, and when I spoke up with a suggestion, he cut me off mid-sentence. We don't need theories. We need real solutions. You could feel the tension in the room. The guy was trying to assert control through noise. So I leaned back, looked at him calmly, and said, "I hope being loud makes up for being wrong." Then I went silent. The room followed. Everyone looked at Marcus. And for the first time that day, he had no words. Because deep down, loud people know the truth. If they weren't so noisy, they'd be exposed. Why this line cuts so deep? Because it doesn't insult. It reveals the strategy behind their behavior. It strips away the performance and says, "You're not confident, you're covering." People who talk the most often have the least to say, and this line shines a spotlight on that fact, without you ever raising your voice. When to use it: when someone constantly interrupts or overpowers group conversations, when a friend or colleague uses volume to cover up weak arguments, when someone thinks dominance comes from talking the most. This line lets you remain composed while they spiral. And it leaves them with one brutal realization. You were calm, and still, you won. 7. You're trying way too hard to be someone I don't respect. This one? It's ice cold, calm, collected, and absolutely devastating, because when someone's being rude, arrogant, or downright obnoxious, they're usually doing it for one reason. They're trying to prove something. To you, to themselves, to the room. It's an act, a costume, a desperate grab for significance. So when you look at them and say, "You're trying way too hard to be someone I don't respect," you don't just shut them down. You unravel the performance. You make it clear that all their effort, all their sarcasm, all their big talk, it's landing in the worst place possible. Your indifference. Here's how I use this one. There was a guy I ran into a few years ago. We'll call him Chris. He was the walking definition of ego with nothing to back it. At every social event, he tried to dominate the room with his stories, flexes, and fake confidence. One evening, we were with mutual friends when he took a jab at something I'd posted online, an opinion I had shared about discipline and silence. Oh, look who thinks he's a philosopher now. Everyone paused, waiting to see if I'd clap back, explain myself, argue. I didn't. I smiled and said, "You're trying way too hard to be someone I don't respect." Then I turned and kept talking to someone else. You could hear the silence settle like a fog. And that was the moment he realized he wasn't getting to me, because I didn't care enough to see him as competition. He wasn't a rival. He was background noise. Why this hits like a bullet? Because it breaks the illusion. It tells them, all this effort you're putting in, all this energy, it's being wasted on someone who doesn't even see you as relevant. It doesn't attack. It just removes all validation. And that's a death sentence for an ego-driven person. When to use it? When someone constantly tries to impress or insult you to get your attention. When a toxic friend or coworker acts like they're superior, but offer nothing valuable. When someone is clearly trying to start a fight just to feel important. This line tells them, you're not intimidating, you're exhausting, and nothing destroys a disrespectful person faster than realizing their act isn't being watched. Disrespect only has power if you give it attention. But when you respond with calm strength, with words that cut through ego and nonsense, you shift the entire balance. You don't need to yell, you don't need to defend. You simply need to remember one thing. Silence is control. Words are weapons. And the most dangerous person in the room is the one who doesn't flinch. If you found value in this video, make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell so you never miss a drop of mindset mastery. Till next time, stay sharp, stay calm, and never let disrespect shake your peace.